The sound of a wrench clattering against concrete echoed through the garage as Mike's phone buzzed with the text he'd been dreading. Sorry, not feeling it. Don't wait for me. 30 minutes he'd sat in that restaurant, wearing his only decent shirt, a hopeful smile, and the faint scent of motor oil he could never quite wash away. Now, as he wiped his calloused hands on a shop rag and glanced at the framed photo of his daughter on his workbench, he had no idea that in less than 24 hours, his life would change forever when one of the wealthiest women in the country would look into his eyes and ask him a question that would leave him speechless. If you're already hooked on Mike's journey from heartbreak to an unbelievable second chance, hit that like button and subscribe to see more incredible stories of fate, love, and unexpected twists that prove life's greatest moments often come when we least expect them. Mike Sullivan had long ago accepted that his life would revolve around two things: his 8-year-old daughter Emma and the auto repair shop he'd built from nothing. At 34, the lines around his eyes had deepened, partly from squinting under countless car hoods and partly from the weight of raising Emma alone since her mother had walked out when she was just 2. "Daddy, are you still going on your date tonight?" Emma asked that Friday afternoon, her legs swinging from her perch on a stack of tires in the corner of Sullivan's Auto Repair. Mike glanced up from the engine he was working on, his face softening at the sight of his daughter's hopeful expression. Emma had been his cheerleader ever since his sister Jen had convinced him to try dating again. "Yeah, sweetheart. Aunt Jen set it up. Says she's a friend from her yoga class." He wiped his hands on a rag, leaving dark smudges that never seemed to fully disappear no matter how hard he scrubbed. "Will she be my new mom?" Emma's question was innocent but hit Mike like a punch to the gut. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, kiddo. It's just dinner." He ruffled her hair, trying to ignore the familiar ache in his chest. "Mrs. Patel is coming over to stay with you, and I'll be home before you know it." But Mike never made it past the appetizer at Rosario's, the nicest restaurant in their small town of Millfield. After waiting half an hour, checking his phone repeatedly, and enduring pitying glances from the waitstaff, the text finally came. His date had arrived early, spotted him through the window, and decided he wasn't worth meeting. The drive home was quiet, the radio off as Mike replayed the evening in his mind. What had she seen? His worn boots? The permanent grease under his fingernails? The fact that he was clearly out of place in a restaurant where the menu didn't list prices? "How'd it go?" Mrs. Patel asked when he walked through the door an hour earlier than expected. "About as well as trying to fix a Ferrari with parts from a lawn mower," Mike replied with a forced smile. "Is Emma asleep?" "Just nodded off. She tried to wait up for you." After Mrs. Patel left, Mike checked on Emma, tucking the blanket around her shoulders and kissing her forehead. In the dim glow of her nightlight, he whispered, "Don't worry, Em. We're doing just fine on our own." The next morning brought an unexpected complication. A sleek black Bentley rolled into his shop just as he was opening up, looking comically out of place among the beat-up trucks and modest sedans that typically filled his lot. "We're not really equipped for," Mike began as the driver's door opened. The woman who stepped out silenced him mid-sentence. Alexandra Reed was instantly recognizable even to someone like Mike who paid little attention to business news. The tech mogul's face had graced magazine covers as she built Reed Innovations into a multi-billion-dollar empire. At 36, she was reportedly worth over $11 billion and known for her brilliant mind and intensely private personal life. "Mr. Sullivan?" Her voice was confident but warmer than he expected. "I'm told you're the best mechanic within 100 miles. Mike found his voice. "I'm good with American and Japanese models, but this," he gestured at the Bentley, "might be out of my league." Alexandra smiled, and something in Mike's chest tightened. "It's not for the Bentley. It's for that." She pointed to a tarp-covered vehicle in the corner of his lot. Mike's eyebrows shot up. "The Chevelle? That's been sitting there for months. Guy dropped it off for restoration and never came back." "I know. I bought it from him this morning." She walked toward the covered classic car with purpose. It was my father's model. He taught me to drive in one just like it. For the next hour, Mike found himself in the surreal position of discussing engine specifications and restoration plans with one of the richest women in America. Alexandra Reed knew cars, really knew them, speaking about carburetors and suspension systems with the ease of someone who had spent time under a hood. "Why bring it here?" Mike finally asked. "You could have it shipped anywhere, to specialists who restore these for celebrities." Alexandra paused, studying him with intelligent eyes. "Because when I asked around town for someone who fixes things with integrity, everyone said the same name. Yours." By the time she left, they had a restoration agreement, and Mike had a check with more zeros than he was comfortable looking at. But it was what happened as she was leaving that truly changed everything. "Mr. Sullivan, Mike," Alexandra said, turning back at the door. "Would you and your daughter like to have dinner with me tonight? To discuss the project further?" Mike hesitated, thinking of the previous night's humiliation. "I'm not sure that's—" "I understand if you're busy," she interrupted. "But I've found that in my position, it's difficult to meet people who see past the bank account. You spent an hour talking to me about cars without once mentioning my company or my net worth. That's refreshing." There was something vulnerable in her expression that made Mike nod before he could overthink it. "Emma would love that. She's 8, though, so fair warning, you'll hear a lot about unicorns and space exploration." Alexandra's smile widened. "Perfect. Those happen to be two of my favorite subjects." That evening, Mike found himself sitting across from Alexandra Reed at her rented lake house, watching in amazement as she and Emma bent their heads together over a napkin, designing what they called a space unicorn rocket ship. The private chef Alexandra had brought in served mac and cheese at Emma's request, alongside perfectly cooked steaks for the adults. "Daddy fixes everything," Emma was saying, her earlier shyness completely evaporated. "Not just cars. He fixed my bike and Mrs. Patel's sink and the roof when it leaked in my room." "Is that so?" Alexandra looked at Mike with interest. Mike shrugged, embarrassed. "Jack of all trades, master of none." "I disagree," Alexandra said quietly. "I think there's something masterful about someone who can adapt to whatever needs fixing." After Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, Mike and Alexandra moved to the porch overlooking the lake. Under a blanket of stars, their conversation flowed with surprising ease. "Can I ask you something personal?" Alexandra said after a comfortable silence. "Seems fair, since my daughter has already told you my entire life story, including the time I cried at her kindergarten play." Alexandra laughed, then grew serious. "Emma mentioned her mom isn't around. That must be difficult." Mike looked out at the dark water. Carrie decided parenthood and small-town life weren't for her. Left when Emma was 2. Sends birthday cards sometimes. He shrugged. "We manage." "You do more than manage. Emma is wonderful, happy, confident, kind. That's not by accident." "She makes it easy," Mike said, but the compliment warmed him. "What about you? The magazines make it seem like you work 24/7. Alexandra sighed. "The magazines aren't wrong. Building Reed Innovations consumed me for years. Now." She hesitated. "Now I'm trying to remember there's more to life. Like restoring old Chevelles. Like remembering what made me happy before spreadsheets and board meetings." She turned to face him fully. "My father was a mechanic too, did I mention that? Not cars, he fixed industrial equipment. Hands always stained with grease, but he could fix anything. He died when I was in college." "I'm sorry," Mike said, meaning it. "When I walked into your shop today, the smell, oil and metal and coffee, it reminded me of him instantly." Her voice grew softer. "And then I watched you work, the way you handled tools like extensions of your hands, and I felt like I was 10 years old again, watching my dad. The vulnerability in her voice created a connection between them that seemed to transcend their different worlds. As the night grew later, they talked about everything: her pressure cooker life in tech, his dreams for Emma's future, their shared love of classic rock and old movies. When Mike finally gathered a sleeping Emma to leave, Alexandra walked them to his truck. "I'd like to see you again," she said directly. "Both of you." Mike hesitated, reality crashing back. "Alexandra, our worlds are completely different. You run a global company. I fix transmissions and make SpaghettiOs for dinner. And that matters because tomorrow you'll fly back to your real life, and will be a quirky small-town story you tell at cocktail parties." Alexandra's expression hardened slightly. "You don't know me well enough to make assumptions about what I value, Mike Sullivan." She handed him a business card. "When you decide not to judge me by my bank account the way others judge you by your profession, call me." Mike drove home in silence, Alexandra's words echoing in his mind. Had he been unfair? The card burned a hole in his pocket for 3 days before he finally called. Their courtship unfolded in ways neither could have predicted. Alexandra extended her stay in Millfield, working remotely and spending evenings with Mike and Emma. She showed up at the garage with lunch, rolled up her sleeves to help with the Chevelle restoration, and never once made Mike feel like he wasn't enough. For Halloween, she joined their tradition of homemade costumes, the three of them trick-or-treating as astronauts with suits Alexandra and Emma had constructed from cardboard and silver paint. At Thanksgiving, she insisted on hosting at the lake house but let Mike cook, claiming his turkey was better than any private chef's. By Christmas, the gossip in town had reached fever pitch. The billionaire and the mechanic were the unlikely romance no one had seen coming. But behind closed doors, they faced real challenges. "I can't just uproot Emma," Mike argued during one tense discussion about their future. "Her school, her friends, my business, everything she knows is here. And I can't run a global company from a town without even a regional airport," Alexandra countered. "I've extended my working remotely arrangement far beyond reasonable limits." The argument ended with no resolution, both of them frustrated by the practical obstacles to their relationship. The next day, Alexandra flew back to San Francisco for an emergency board meeting, leaving things unsettled between them. 3 days of silence followed, the longest they'd gone without speaking since meeting. Mike threw himself into work, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in his chest. Emma grew quieter, asking daily when Alexandra would call. On the 4th day, Mike arrived at the shop to find a courier waiting with an envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, architectural plans for a building labeled Reed Innovations, Midwest Research Campus, with a Millfield address. His phone rang almost immediately. "Before you say anything," Alexandra's voice came through, "this isn't just about us. The tax incentives make sense, the property values are favorable, and the quality of life for employees." "Alex," Mike interrupted, using the nickname only he called her. "Are you building a corporate campus in Millfield because of me?" A pause. "Not entirely. But I won't pretend you're not a factor." Her voice softened. "I've spent my life making business decisions. This is the first time I'm making one with my heart too." 2 weeks later, Alexandra returned to Millfield with a full corporate team to announce the new campus. The town was buzzing with excitement about the jobs and economic boost. But Mike felt a growing unease. "You can't reshape your entire company for me," he told her that night as they sat on his worn couch after Emma had gone to bed. "What happens if this doesn't work out between us? You've made a billion-dollar decision based on a relationship that's only months old." Alexandra took his hands in hers. "Mike, I've built my career on calculated risks. This campus makes business sense regardless of what happens with us. But I'm not going to pretend I'm not hoping for a specific outcome." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box. Mike's heart nearly stopped. "I'm not proposing," she clarified quickly. "Not yet. But I want you to know where I stand. She opened the box to reveal a simple silver key. I bought a house here. Nothing extravagant, well, by my standards anyway. It's a place for me, a commitment to being part of this community whether or not you and I work out. Mike stared at the key, emotions warring within him. I don't want to be a charity case, Alex. I don't want to be the project you took on, the fixer-upper human. Alexandra's eyes flashed. Is that what you think this is? That I see you as some kind of project? She stood up, pacing his small living room. Mike, do you know what my life was like before I met you? I had everything money could buy and not a single person who cared about Alexandra, not the CEO. Do you know how many times I've laughed since meeting you and Emma? How many times I've felt like a real person instead of a walking stock price? Her vulnerability broke something open in Mike. I'm scared, he admitted. Scared that one day you'll wake up and realize you traded your exciting life for small-town monotony. That you'll resent us for holding you back. And I'm scared you'll always see the money between us, she countered. That you'll never fully believe I'm here because of who you are, not what I can give you. They stayed up talking until dawn, laying bare their fears and hopes. By the time the sun rose, they had no perfect answers but a deeper understanding and commitment to finding their way forward together. Spring brought the groundbreaking for the Reed Innovations campus. Summer saw the completion of the Chevelle restoration, which they drove with the windows down, Emma in the back seat singing along to the radio. By fall, Alexandra had settled into a rhythm of splitting her time between Millfield and San Francisco, with more and more of her personal belongings migrating to the house she'd bought. It was a crisp October day, exactly 1 year after they'd met, when Alexandra suggested they take the Chevelle for a drive. They ended up at the lake where they'd had their first real conversation. I have something to ask you, Alexandra said as they walked along the shore, the autumn leaves crunching beneath their feet. Mike's heart raced, sensing the weight of the moment. Alexandra stopped walking and turned to face him. This past year has taught me what really matters. Not the company, not the money, though I'm proud of what I've built. What matters is having someone who sees you for who you really are. She took a deep breath. Mike Sullivan, you're the most genuine person I've ever known. You've never once treated me differently because of my wealth. You've challenged me, supported me, and shown me what it means to build a life around love instead of achievement. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out a small velvet box. As she opened it to reveal a simple but elegant ring, she asked the question that would change everything, "Can you be my husband?" Mike looked at the woman before him, brilliant, determined, and somehow in love with him despite all the reasons it shouldn't make sense. He thought about their journey, the obstacles they'd overcome and those still ahead. He thought about Emma, who had blossomed with Alexandra in their lives. On one condition, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Alexandra raised an eyebrow, waiting. I get to fix the dishwasher when it breaks, even if you can afford to buy a new one. Her laugh rang out across the lake as she threw her arms around him. Deal. Their wedding the following spring was an unusual blend of worlds, Silicon Valley executives mingling with local mechanics, Emma serving as both flower girl and ring bearer, the restored Chevelle decorated with flowers for their getaway car. They wrote their own vows, promising not perfect understanding but perfect effort, not a flawless journey but an authentic one. As they danced under twinkling lights, Alexandra whispered in Mike's ear, "Thank you for showing me that the most valuable things can't be bought." Mike pulled her closer. "And thank you for proving that sometimes the most unlikely stories are the ones most worth living." Years later, when asked about their unusual love story, Mike would simply say, "Sometimes the universe has a strange sense of humor. I got stood up on a blind date and ended up marrying a Bill."